Hi, fans of high quality entertainment. I am here with the author of this book, The Infinite Universe of Yoko Ono, Madeline Bocaro. That's how you pronounce it, right? I did it right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm also with Robert S., who has a YouTube channel, Robert's Rob
Obscure music.
Robscure Music. Yeah, that's it. And then Tony has Beatley Tones Beatles channel. And anyway, all three of us have this book. I've had it for probably about a year, and I think it's excellent.
2 years. It is excellent.
Yeah, probably over a year. And Tony, when did you pick up the book?
I got this about maybe about 6 months ago, something like that.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad you all have it.
I've read some of it, but I'm going to the hospital next week, so I've got about 3 books. This one of them that I'm taking in with me.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Okay. And we all wish you nothing but the best, Tony, with your health issues.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All the best to you, Tony.
Yeah.
Cheers.
We're praying for you.
Larry. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning. How did you, Madeline? I already know because I watched other interviews, but somebody new to you. How did you become a fan of Yoko Ono?
Well, I saw a picture of her in Time magazine. It was 1967, and the article, and I saw it in 1968 when I was 10 years old. And I just saw a picture of her in front of a frame of her film, Bottoms. And I read about it, and I said, wow, this adult is doing something so wild and almost childlike, making a film of behinds. And, I just thought it was awesome. So I kept the picture, and I started trying to find out more about her. And back then, with no internet, you couldn't really get too much news, especially because she was only making news in the art world at the time. But then, lo and behold, she appears with John Lennon on the White Album, right? And I started like, wow, she's with him. This is great. Now I can find out everything she's doing. So I started, just dove right in and collected everything I could about them together. And I witnessed the bed-ins as they unfolded and felt like I was a part of history with that. And just the songs and the music and the events and the artwork and just everything they did together was so positive and had a lot of humor in it. And I just felt they were so genuine and sincere. Yeah. And I just felt like they were family to me.
Yeah. And that's one thing I think some people that kind of bash Yoko don't realize is she had her own career long before she met John. She was very successful as an artist, right?
Yeah. And then about successful, but she was in with the avant-garde. She was known in that world, but she was also not well accepted by them either, because she was on the brink of becoming so much more popular. Her Bottoms film really broke her out a little bit, and they were all like, well, they didn't want to be so commercial, as they say.
Yeah. I remember, I think the very first song of hers I heard was the B-side to Give Peace a Chance. Was
Remember
it
Love.
Was Seen the
Remember
Wind?
Love.
Remember Love? Okay. I wasn't sure if it was that or Who Has Seen the Wind, but the first time I heard it, it was just so different, right? And I didn't know if I liked it or didn't like it, but I played it again and again, and I just thought like her voice was so sweet, and I became a fan. Like, it's
beautiful. It's so childlike and innocent.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I have a really good quote from Sean about that song. He was on, that was recorded after midnight when everybody went home after the bed-in. She's on the bed and John's got the acoustic, and they did that. It was one of the first proper songs she ever composed herself. And it's kind of like Sun King on Abbey Road, what John is playing.
Yeah.
But Sean said to David Frick on Sirius Radio, they had a birthday tribute to Yoko. And he said, there's a sweetness and hesitance in her voice. Obviously, a hesitance which vanishes very quickly when she starts making her own albums like Plastic Ono Band or Fly. How intimidating it must be finding yourself in a world-famous couple celebrity relationship with a Beatle. having the bravery to jump headfirst into songwriting. It must have been daunting for her. I feel like you can hear it in her voice. It's appropriate and natural hesitance. Her husband's argument is the most famous songwriter in the world. There's something sweet and brave and something remarkable in the context of how she's going to develop.
Yeah. And John could see that in her, like the talent, right? For to get into music and everything. And
I don't even think they thought of themselves as talented, because talented to me is like you talented tap dancer or you're a talented juggler. You know, they were just telling the truth and doing it in their own way. They weren't taking vocal lessons. They just gave it to you raw.
Yeah.
Can I just backtrack slightly? When your first exposure to Yoko was the seeing the article about the Bottoms movie. Was that your first exposure to John or Yoko, or were you aware of John already? It was, it was 1968.
Oh, no,
you were only 10.
No, I saw the Beatles on Sullivan when I was 6, and I had the albums.
Okay.
I had the Chipmunks sing the Beatles hits, and I thought, hey, why are these Beatles doing the Chipmunks songs? Like, okay, maybe they're better than the Chipmunks. And I had the albums. I had the white. I went to get it the week it came out.
Okay.
I was a cool kid.
And you could just hear her voice on the album because it wasn't.
You heard Bungalow Bill, and I guess I had read in articles that it was her singing on there, and I was like, oh, great, she's with John Lennon.
Yeah,
and Birthday, I think, as well.
Yeah,
that's great that two of the people that you were interested in, people, let's say the Beatles and Yoko, come together. That must have been you must have been like, wow, this is fantastic. Yeah, and certainly if Yoko, I mean, it obviously projected her into the populace, and you were able to get more news about her.
Yeah, thank goodness. Or maybe I would have lost track of her. Who knows?
Yeah.
So it all worked out well, actually.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, very well.
So Tony, do you have any other questions about the book, or?
Quite a few, but more about Yoko person. I mean, how did you first? Because you've met her several times, haven't you? How did you first get to meet her and kind of be, close to her that she would open up and be honest with you?
Well, I started writing letters to her when I was a kid. When they moved into the Dakota, and I had an address. So I wrote a letter and she wrote back, and I was like stunned. And then I wrote again, and I really was just saying how much I loved her work, art and the music. And I would ask about the meanings or tell her what I thought it meant. And she would say, oh my God, you got it. This is great. You're right. And that went on for years. And then, I saw that one-to-one concert when I was 14 in 1972. And they're making a big documentary on that now. So that's
you were there. You were there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Did you go to the afternoon or the evening?
The afternoon, because I found it in the New York Times. There was this teeny little article, and I didn't even know about the evening concert. And it said tickets to a matinee has been added. I'm like, and I was 14. I called my friends and I said, let's go. And great.
That must have been amazing.
Yeah, it's the best concert ever. So, I always loved her. Always bought the albums or whatever. And then didn't think much because she got back together with John, right, and just doing Double Fantasy. And I was working for CMJ at the time, College Media Journal, and I was probably going to be interviewing them, and I was all excited. And then John got killed, and then that was that. And then in 1983 or 4, my friend said to me, you love Yoko so much, she really needs to meet you. And I was like, okay, I didn't think of it that way. She said, I go to the Dakota. I used to go all the time, meet John and Yoko. They were great. You should come. And I never went there. I just thought it was standing on their doorstep. I wouldn't want to do that. Mm-hmm. But she said, no, come with me. I said, all right, let's go on her birthday so she knows we're there for her. And I bought her a birthday present, and we went. And I said, I'm not waiting here more than 5 minutes. This is stalking now. She says, no, and within 4 minutes, Yoko came out of the park. She had been taken on a horse and carriage ride by a friend, and they came out, and she came right up to us, and I gave her the present, told her who I was. She let out a little scream, and she went, "Oh my God, it's you." She goes, "I'm having this art exhibition of John's work next week. You have to come to this." And then she invited me to her art exhibitions and her concerts, and I went backstage to all those, and it was just fantastic. She was just happy that back then, especially, nobody was saying anything about her work. And she was thrilled. And honestly, I was shocked how open and loving and caring, embracing she was. It was a lot. Like, whoa, she should be more protective of herself, But she's very intuitive. She could tell who's there for her and who cares, and she's very brilliant. So after 5 minutes, you can tell why John loved her. You just get a vibe from her. She's very, very intense.
Yeah, it's always. It always baffles me that those Beatles fans that want to bash her, right? They think by doing it, they think they're protecting John or any of the other Beatles. But I've always thought that if you don't get Yoko, you don't get John.
Exactly.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and anybody that's bashing her is just repeating lies. Absolute lies that were written to sell papers. And one of the journalists who I quoted in my book, she did a beautiful interview with Yoko in 1974, and it was never published. So I said, "Well, Caroline, why didn't this ever get published? It's fantastic." She said, "Well, the magazine told me you have to dirty this up. This is not going to sell papers. You have to say that she turned onto drugs, John onto drugs. She abandoned her daughter." Lie, basically. And luckily she had the integrity to pull the story.
Good for her, because it's true, they definitely had a narrative that they wanted to sell when it came to Yoko, because saying good things about Yoko was not going to sell magazines or newspapers.
Right.
And it's a real shame, because Yoko is so much more than just John Lennon's wife.
So much.
She had some incredible experiences and some incredible art that she was doing beforehand. She did have some musical training, so it wasn't like she met John and suddenly said, "Okay, let me try my hand at rock and roll or music in general." I mean, that wasn't new to her, and I don't think people really know that about her. And then she continues to have a career afterwards. And in fact, she continues to have hit songs, So,
and on top of it, she's perpetuating his legacy and giving the fan. When he died, she felt like responsible to give the fans more of him. She felt the loss,
she's done,
our loss. And every year she put out something. Elliot Mintz did the Lost Lennon tapes, and from then on, they started putting out albums, and still going on. The beautiful Mind Games box just came out.
Yeah, I remember her coming out sometime in the early 80s, might have been 1981 or 1982, where she said that she was going to be keeping John's name alive and keeping his music alive, and the stuff that we have had that we never thought we'd ever get to hear is just fantastic. She absolutely delivered on that promise in spades, basically.
Right.
Yes, I think she's done, and the Lennon camp have done a wonderful job with the reissues, the box sets, the compilations. Give Me Some Truth. I like the way that was set up. So it's not necessarily chronological. They've done an excellent job. And since we're here talking about the book, I think Madeline has done an excellent job in terms of putting together not necessarily a biography, but a compilation of, why don't we have the book? There's also a shirt available.
Yeah.
But she's done a wonderful job putting together a collage, if you will, quotes and stories and interesting aspects of Yoko's life and her entire life. She's had husbands before John Lennon. She had her whole art projects, and she's had, like I said, hit singles. She has such an interesting life, And I feel that, if people were to read this book, if they like Yoko, they'll read this book and learn to love her again. And if they
don't know
Yoko,
her,
you
they
can
don't know her.
read it and appreciate it, and not only appreciate her, but appreciate, I feel, her music, because now you know where that's coming from. People will listen to the Plastic Ono Band album by John Lennon and say, oh, it's incredible, and he's getting out his pain and anguish. And you know what? That's sort of what Yoko is doing. A scream is, yes, it's primal, but it's also very emotional type of message that somebody can send. And as a Japanese woman in the US who happened to be associated with the Beatles, she was getting a lot of people who didn't want anything to do with her. She was getting a lot of hate. She kind of took it all in stride, but you know what? I think she was sort of releasing some of that painful experiences of her past even before she met John, because as a child she had some interesting experiences, and I'm sure Madeline can talk more about that, and maybe will. But honestly, I think this is just an incredible book, and I love the way it's put together, and it's obviously a passion project of yours, Madeline.
Yeah, I had to get her true story out, her true nature, her spirit. That's why I use so much of her own words, John's words. I even have like Phil Spector, Pete Townsend, just quotes.
Yeah, I was going to mention
time.
Pete Townsend saying about the aggression and just how it relates to him smashing his guitar. Yoko's kind of doing the same thing, right, with her.
Right. He attended the Destruction and Art Symposium run by Gustav Metzger, which Yoko attended. But Metzger spoke at Townsend's college, and he was well aware of Yoko, and that kind of inspired him greatly. And he speaks about that. And I put, there's a chapter about every album, and I go through every song.
That's my favorite part of the book. Yeah.
And I put them all through the story, not in the back like a discography, because everything that was going on those songs was happening in her life, and it's just appropriate for them to be where they are. And another thing I did with that is I would put, approximately infinite universe, the album. So if you don't want to read about her music at all, if you hate it that much, skip that chapter, but I had to have it all in there, about the meanings of the songs. But mainly, I put every one of them.
I wish I had my CDs to show and albums.
Mainly, I tried to bring out her spirit, her intelligence, how she's pointing out that we're misplacing our values greatly. Everything is, her biggest thing is like how water is more valuable than gold. We just got it wrong.
Yeah.
And just lots of little things, how she sees things we don't see, how the invisible things are important, how history isn't what happened, it's what didn't happen. It's just brilliant. Like, you see the whole world in a new way when you hear about her. And she examines, like, she sees things in terms of molecules, flower petals, the tiny little things in nature that are important, that we should be respecting. And then in the other hand, she sees infinite universes. Well, we're just in our neighborhood, our town, our post office, we take a trip to Europe, but she is expanded that much in her mind to be reaching out in infinite universes. So,
even as a 12-year-old, she had me thinking, like, who has seen the wind? I was thinking, who has seen the wind? You can't see the wind. And it gets
the invisible things that are important. The air. If we didn't have air, none of us would be here.
Yeah,
that's true. It's true. Yoko kind of looks at, we look at things and we see the things that are there. Yoko also sees the things that are not there.
Even with sound, she would listen to the ticking in between, the sounds in between the ticking of a clock. Like, who thinks about that? She's just coming from another place, another dimension.
But it's such an interesting way to look at things. You look at something and you think, not just what isn't there, but perhaps what could be there. What could you fill that space with? And then, that will take your mind into many different directions. And it might be different for a lot of different people. And that's kind of the beauty of it, that's art, honestly. You look at a piece of art And I may have one feeling about it, and somebody else will look at it and have an entirely different feeling. And I think when Yoko tried to do that with a lot of her artwork, and many of her pieces were sort of instructional pieces. I'm trying to think of some of it right now, but like she would say,
dig a hole in the garden, that sort of stuff. And
I'm sorry.
Dig a hole in the garden.
Yes, thank you.
The clouds dripping and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it was a lot of imaginary things. They'll imagine Peace Tower was a tower made of light. And one of the first times John got together with her, he said, "Hey, can you build this in my garden?" And she thought, "Oh, that's cute. He wants to kind of hire me as an artist to do something for him so we can kind of start a communication." But she said, "Well, that's really conceptual." And then years later, we have Imagine Peace Tower in Iceland. She actually created it.
And also the fans of John Lennon, we probably wouldn't have the song Imagine if it wasn't for Yoko Ono.
Right.
That's true.
Exactly.
Mm.
So yeah, the Japanese element, I have a whole chapter about Japanese influence on her work. Of course, she grew up there until she was 19, so she came to New York. And there's chapters about sky, clouds, wind, how it all affects her thinking and her work. So it's just it's not just a biography, as you said.
And you touch upon the numerology as well. The numbers was it 33, I think.
Oh, the number 33 is
and
very
of course
important.
9. Everyone knows that John Lennon.
9. Yeah, no, she relied on astrologers, numerologists, tarot readers. She had a directionalist who would send her and John in different directions depending on what fate was approaching. And, she kept sending him away from New York, remember? So that was kind of, it was a warnings that she couldn't keep sending him away, unfortunately, right? And then in Greece, there's a chapter called Premonitions. It's one of the most chilling things. And it's all about, things she kind of thought about before they actually happened. And one of the things is they were in Greece in 1969, and they were taken to a palm reader. And this reader said, we can see that John is going to be killed on an island. And they were on these Greek islands, and they were supposed to go on a boat with Donovan the next day, and they didn't go, and they came home. And then years later, and after 1980, she was interviewed by the same guy who had interviewed her in Greece. And he said, "Yoko, did you realize she was talking about the island of Manhattan?" And then you just see Yoko's a wave of like, "Oh my God, run over."
Wow.
Yeah. And it reminds me of her Season of Glass album, right? When that came out with the picture of John's glass, all bloody glasses on the cover, even for fans of Yoko Ono, it probably upset some of them. But the way I look at it, John would have approved of that because that is reality, right?
Exactly.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
Faced, right?
She saw him in a pool of blood, she says. It wasn't just the glasses.
Yeah.
And, she and John had the same mind. They thought alike. And, she presented it as if, this is what he would say.
Yeah.
Show you.
So I'm curious. You mentioned earlier, Madeline, how at 14 you encouraged some friends to go see things. And, I'm wondering, were your parents supportive of the things you were doing?
Not really. They're very old-fashioned. That's why I was drawn to Yoko. I was an only child. I wanted a friend, and she was like my imaginary friend or like an older sister. I always thought of her like, whoa, she's thinking along my lines. I get her, And, they didn't stop me from going, but they would roll their eyes. But then when John was killed, my mother, when I came home, I had gone to the city to stand there. What else do you do, right? With millions of people. And I got home and my mother said, I just want you to know I observed the silence for John and I really feel for Yoko. I'm like, wow.
Oh, wow. Nice. Yeah, I'll never forget that day. Actually, a lot of people learned it the night before. I actually didn't. And at the time I was working and I had set my alarm. I had a clock radio, so the radio was my alarm. It would go off, and it went off, and the first thing I heard was that John Lennon was shot and killed, and that's a horrible way to have to wake up.
No.
And I was stunned. I didn't know what to do, and I was sort of in a daze. And I went to work, and as soon as I got to work, people said, "Why are you here? We can't believe you came to work. Like, why did I not go into the city?"
Well, that was a week later.
They knew I was such a big John Lennon fan.
Yeah.
I think I was in shock.
Well, I also found out on the 9th, because obviously that's when it was in the UK, and I was woken up by my mum, who told me the news, and I'd not been working very very long. I said to her, "I can't go to work today," and my mum said, "You know what? I don't think they're going to give you, the day off because one of the Beatles has died." That's what she thought. And they wouldn't have either. So I went to work that day, and it was weird because when going on the train, there was no morning TV in those days in 1980 in the UK. So unless you unless you listened to the radio, you wouldn't have known that. It was like nobody knew. Nobody on the train knew. They're just all sort of getting on with their lives and chatting to each other. And I'm thinking, how dare you? These people didn't know, because obviously it was too late to make the morning papers, and there was no breakfast TV in them days. So it was just if you were happened to be listening to the radio on the morning of the 9th of December, then you would have known. But
it was so different here. We heard, 10 o'clock at night, we heard he was shot.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, in the leg, whatever. Okay. And then my mom came downstairs and told me, and it's the first time I ever fainted. I just fell to the ground. But then I went to bed just crying. I didn't see what, at the time, I wasn't thinking of John as a Beatle. I mean, Double Fantasy was out, and, but I was all excited about that. And I just thought of Yoko and Sean right away. And I wake up in the morning and the whole world is in turmoil. And I didn't think the world would react like that. It was wild that it had been on the news all night long. I didn't know. I was.
Yeah, I remember it was that night. It was on the news. I guess I was watching the news, and at first he's shot, and then he had died, and I'm by myself in this small apartment. It's like, and you got to go to bed, and it's seriously like a death in the family, even though it felt like a death in the family.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, my mum, when she delivered the news, she said John's been shot, and I had a mate who was called John, and I was, John who? It was the last thing on my mind that it could be John Lennon. And when I found out that I could hear the radio downstairs playing Beatles songs, and my mum used to listen to like a talk radio station in the morning. They never played pop music. They just talked, and I kind of knew straight away, that the fact that they were playing, Imagine on the radio. And my mum said, because when she said he's been shot, she didn't say he'd been killed. She just said he's been shot. And I'm kind of thinking, well, if it's John Lennon, he'll be okay.
Well, there's a chapter called "A Wind That Never Dies," and it's all about the death and the aftermath and how Yoko dealt with it, and the other horrible nightmares that she had to endure, which was almost worse than him being killed. It was just unbelievable. And I just keep thinking how much more John and Yoko could have done creatively if people weren't trying to bash them all the time. I mean, they went years without making music at all, not just because Sean was born, but, they could have done so much more if they were. Think about how much they were putting out in the early 70s, So he was making double albums. John did, Plastic Ono Band, Imagine, sometimes in New York City.
Right. Yeah.
One every year. And then that stopped because they got torn apart.
Do you think there was more? Do you think there was more to John's temporary retirement than looking after Sean and Yoko's taking care of the business, do you think that he withdrew because of the bashing away, the way that Yoko was being was
No, that was
treated?
after. I mean, he was happy, with the baby. They were going to Japan, spending months and months in Japan, including the summers, the three, like 76, 77, 78. They were serene and happy in Japan. They met Yoko's family. They had a big reunion over there. They had Sean. They were fine. I mean, yeah, they had their problems like any couple, but the bashing was kind of behind them, and they were looking forward to, he got into music again, and then he was going to tour with that Double Fantasy. And then again, gets shot down, literally.
Yeah, but I mean that in those years between 1975 and 1980, when he wasn't doing anything apart from looking after Sean, and I know they were going on trips and stuff like that. But you said about the bashing, how much more music they could, or more output they could have done during that time if it wasn't for the bashing. That's why I asked the question.
Well, I'm saying he probably would have done more in 74, 75, but then they had the baby too. That was another deterrent, because he wanted to give that his all to the baby. But I'm saying, as far as even in every aspect, she could have been doing more art. He was doing art too, right? He was doing his drawings, and they were never really exhibited properly until after his death, when she started showing them at galleries and putting them for sale, lithographs and all that. He was always drawing, always reading about everything, philosophies, religions, cooking, macrobiotic. They were very healthy. But I just think, they could have done so much more for humankind. They were trying to help people. It was a big task to undertake, but they were trying to promote world peace in a big way. And they were shut down politically. They were shut down just because of their relationship. They didn't like Yoko. They hated her in England. That's why they moved here. John thought he would be better off here.
Yeah.
And he was. I mean, he was able to walk around, but the hatred for her was still always underlying.
Have you had a chance to get over to London to see her exhibition at the Tate Modern yet?
I saw it in New York when it was here. It's pretty much the same as the Museum of Modern Art. And I spent all summer at that one. I went to the opening when she was there. It was incredible. It's really good. People are so enjoying it. The headlines are like, the Beatles are an afterthought. Out of John Lennon's piano. This woman, this is what she meant. Oh my God, now we see. And, everybody's enjoying it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You don't really think about the Beatles, but it's all about her art. And we went a few months ago. It was just absolutely brilliant. Everything that you kind of read about, was there. The sort of the ladder guys with with the thing on the ceiling with the yes written and the magnifying glass, that was there. The hammer and nailing and all the danger box, all that sort of stuff was there. It was great. It's a really good exhibition.
Yeah, it's on through September. Everybody should go see it.
Yeah, till September. But it's had really great reviews here as well.
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful that you were able to go to some of those exhibitions, Madeline. But I'm curious. There was one, I believe it was around 2015, where Yoko wanted to, in celebration, I think, or was it a tribute to John, where she wanted to have the largest human peace sign?
Oh, that was in Central Park, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And did you happen to attend that?
I didn't. I'm not an outdoorsy person in the summer. I could have died.
Okay.
But, yeah, I remember that.
So the weather kept you away. Okay.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
but I saw
I think
the Whitney exhibition in 1989. She hadn't exhibited since 1971. That This Is Not Here exhibition. That was around John's birthday.
yes.
That was for a week at Everson. It was amazing. I was too young to attend that, but she literally hadn't done anything even after he passed until 1989, when the Whitney asked her to do a retrospective there. That was beautiful.
And going back to her music for a minute, like I think Ringo playing drums on some of her tracks shows some respect towards Yoko, right?
Oh, lots of it. They really got along. He visited her every time he was
Wow.
in New York City.
And even Paul in Get Back, you see him getting behind the kit while she's doing her thing. I think I've always wondered what Paul thought of her, just like her studio albums, if it's ever been.
Yeah, that's interesting. He's never commented on that. But they did
Because
something together.
He could be pretty experimental himself too, right?
Right. He was before John, and there's a funny quote from him too. And let me see if I can find it. It's funny because he was into all that. He's like, John's in Weybridge with his pipe and slippers, and I was in the city, and I was going to all these avant-garde concerts, and then John comes out and says, I'm avant-garde, and nobody knew that Paul ever was, So.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so it'd be interesting to know what Paul thought about her albums, though, because he is so into the avant-garde and the experimental type of music. And honestly, I think, particularly on Double Fantasy, when that came out, I was so super impressed with Yoko's songs on there.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
I enjoyed them as much, if not more.
A lot of people did, and they were saying, "Oh, she's more cutting edge than him," and reviews. It was cool. I found this quote. Okay, Paul told Q magazine in 1997. I did get a bit pissed off that Lennon became the avant-garde one because 2 or 3 years before John got loose, I was going to a lot of concerts. He was living in Weybridge, and I didn't want to say I did it first, but it was niggling me a bit that it was going down in posterity that John was the cool one and Paul was a bit stoppy. I did a loop symphony. I was going to all these concerts of experimental composers, and the loops would find their way onto Tomorrow Never Knows. But the symphony was just for me and my mates. So I said to John, I've got all this stuff, and I'm thinking of putting it out as an album called Paul McCartney Goes Too Far. He said, brilliant, man. Do it, please. So John would have been all for that. He would have been biggest fan of Paul's avant-garde music.
Yeah. Mm. And I do think that Yoko owes George an apology in the afterlife someday about eating those biscuits.
Possibly, I would think. But you're hungry, you got to do what you got to do. I'm sure they weren't her first choice food, but.
Sorry, I was just going to say, just while we were just talking about her songs on Double Fantasy, I think the thing was that because the punk thing had happened, and all her songs on side one of Double Fantasy have all got that sort of new wavy sort of sound. It was as if that she was more in tune with what was going on in the current music scene than maybe John was. I think a lot of John's songs, his songs on that album are good, but they could have just as easily have fitted on maybe Walls and Bridges as Double Fantasy. There wasn't a tremendous movement in style, whereas Yoko's songs were really modern sounding for
It's funny because John would listen to the new albums. He'd have assistants go get me the new Bowie, go get me the new Stones, But Yoko wasn't. She was listening to Okinawan folk music and and then she said, people tell me this is the kind of music young people are making, and I tell them I was doing this kind of music before you were born. Yeah. So she wasn't out there listening to what's modern now. She's just
What about the B-52s? I think they
John was a B-52s fan, right?
The B-52s when they first came out.
Yeah, I think he heard Rock Lobster, and he's like, they're doing Yoko, basically.
But even that song, Give Me Something, there were a couple of remix albums, Yes, I'm a Witch and Yes, I'm a Witch Too. And one of my favorite bands, Sparks, did a remix for that album. And it's like, oh my God, Sparks are into Yoko.
Yeah, that was number one on the Billboard Hot Dance Club chart in 2016. It's on the CD compilation I'm a Witch Too. It was the remix project, the Ono remixes on Twisted Records, and Russell multi-tracked his voice on there, and he morphed it into like this mischievous orchestral waltz, like bombastic timpani on there, and Ron's orchestrations. Of course. Cool.
There was that also that album, Every Man Has a Woman That Loves Him, that came out in 1983. I think they all did it for her 50th birthday. I think that was, and there was all these artists covering Yoko songs. I remember Elvis Costello did "Walking on Thin Ice." What did she think of that? Do you know?
Oh, she was thrilled.
Yeah.
She was ecstatic about that.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's a good album.
So
well, hopefully Yoko will start to get more respect. I think honestly, if she was putting out some of that music that she had in the 70s a couple decades later, it might have been more widely accepted. Like you said, with the all punk scene and everything,
I think she has more respect today than she did like even 20
so.
years ago.
And once she started taking some of the songs and making them like dance hits, if you will, she became extremely popular.
Yeah, she went to every club and danced around at midnight to promote those things. And yeah, they were really big hits for her.
So I've got 3 questions from my viewers. The first one is from Starman Brinley. What did you learn most about Yoko in the process of writing the book?
I knew Yoko. I just had this mind meld with her.
Yeah.
So but that helped me because I knew what was important to bring forth.
Yeah.
Like I'm writing about a certain topic I remember she said something about that in NMA 1973. Let me go grab the exact quote. And, I just had to get her true spirit onto paper.
Okay. And Bob, I got one for you, Larry. Do you think Yoko feels the Beatles as a whole actually hurt her as an artist and her artistic ambitions?
Beatles? No, she doesn't think of it that way. I mean, when John told her he was going to leave the Beatles, she literally had a chill because he said, "It's just you and me now." And she's like, "Wait a minute, what's he going to be preoccupied with while I do my work?" Because she's an independent artist. She's thinking, she's at those Let It Be sessions. She's writing, she's thinking, she's reading. She's thinking of her next step, her next work. She's like, what's he going to do now? She didn't know they were going to jump headfirst into everything together. And she didn't know if she could work with John. But it just so happened that it worked out. But Beatles had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
At all. John loved the Beatles.
Yeah.
Yoko loves the Beatles music. It just evolved the way it did. That's all.
Okay. And the final question, Hypnovertigo. I'm curious if the author is aware of Yoko's massive influence on industrial music. White House, Nurse with Wound, TG were all massive Yoko fans. Honestly, I think her work tops the Beatles. She's excellent.
Well, awesome. Thank you.
I don't know about that.
And I would think all those mixes that influence, they're very, techno and heavy.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's great. I'm glad to hear that and keep rocking.
A bold statement.
And that band I'm into now, like their early 70s, it's kind of like that Mine Train on Fly, like hypnotic.
Hallelujah is their track that sounds just like it.
Yeah.
Even Big Star, they used her Mrs. Lennon track for their song Holocaust.
Yeah.
There's a lot out there that we even don't know about. There's Thurston Moore is a huge fan, Sonic Youth, and he bought my book recently.
Yeah.
And it's great. A lot of her colleagues and friends are supportive. Sean has been very supportive. And I got John Dunbar, who introduced John to Yoko, the Indica Gallery owner. I met with him last summer. We spent a lot of time one afternoon, and he's just blown away. And he brought it to Marianne Faithfull, who we used to be married to. Just people are loving it. Olivia Harrison recommended it on Instagram. And she's very spiritual, too. So she and Yoko got along very well.
Yeah, I just have one more question. Do you have any idea if Season of Glass and some of her later albums will ever be, re-released or remastered?
I think it was planned, and then like the John Lennon projects got in between, so I'm sure they will. There's still be some time.
I don't know when was the last time that you spoke to her or saw her, but we heard maybe a year, 18 months ago that she was not very well. Just wondered if you had a health update
Her health isn't good. You know, she's not very well, but she's 91.
Yeah.
And she's moved to the farm upstate, which she's had for a long, long time anyway. She went there every summer. And, you know, she's gone quiet and she's choosing to stay out of everything. But, yeah, she's what it is, you know. She's doing what she's got to do there.
Okay, thanks.
I love that other quote from Sean Lennon in the book that Yoko taught him so much about music, right? That people don't seem to realize. Well, even on the Mind Games box set, you can hear Yoko telling John things, you know, helping him out with the songs and everything.
Yeah, you hear it, and he's asking her, "What's this chord?" And she'd say, "You know, E flat major seventh diminished." You know, she knew. So. Yeah.
And again, it goes back to
here's the quote from Sean. Yeah.
And we were talking earlier about quotes. Is there a particular quote of hers that you really like?
Oh my God, you're putting me on the spot. There's so many. I think. Well, once I asked her, because she always talks about sixth and seventh dimensions, and I said, and senses, and I said, do you think we all have a sixth sense? And she said, I think we all have a seventh sense, and we're just not using it. And then she's always talking about being in the subconscious, because that's what she's trying to bring out. You know, she thinks you should really listen to your subconscious. And I said, well, you do think, you know, that's the highest form of intelligence? And she said, yes, consciousness is a waste of time. I love that. It's brilliant and hilarious, you know.
Didn't she have a quote, something along the lines of silence being like
silence is the highest form of expression.
Highest form of communication. Words sometimes need that.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Or like, I don't accommodate the audience. I ask the audience to accommodate. You know, you got to make the audience a little bit uncomfortable, so you know that you're really reaching them and teaching them something, sharing. You know, so yeah. But the funniest thing is, we were at a party for the release of, I think it was John's book, Skywriting by Word of Mouth, and we were at this club called The Saint, and there was this dance floor, and Dancing and Walking on Thin Ice came on, and she's dancing with me and my friends, and I said, oh my God, look, Yoko already's dancing. And because usually Yoko's song comes on, people leave, you know. And she goes, well, maybe I'm becoming too commercial. I told her she was not kidding, you know. She's like, oh.
So she has a sense of humor too.
Oh my God.
Yoko's more than you realize.
Oh, much more. So
anyone watching this, please read the book, learn about Yoko.
And you have that Sean Lennon quote you were mentioning?
Oh, I did. Now I lost it again. Hold on. Oh God. It's probably here. Hold on. Many don't realize what a brilliant musician and producer my mother is. She taught me piano, songwriting, and studio production from an early age. I would not know what a diminished chord or a compressor or counterpoint melody or an overdub or reverb and delay was. None of it had it not been for my mother's mentorship. He's our biggest fan, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God for him.
Yeah. So, any final questions for Madeline? And I'll have all the links for her website, and of course to buy this book, which is highly recommended by all of us.
Thank you. And the cover art is by an Australian artist, Kat McGinnis.
I love that.
I was going to ask about that.
Yoko loved the picture too. She tweeted out to say that she loved it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You couldn't have found a more perfect picture. And you know what? I like that the blue that you're using, and I'm seeing all of your Facebook posts and everything. And as soon as I see this, and it's funny that you mentioned that Paul McCartney actually used this at one point, the same color scheme.
Yeah, well, he has the book, so it's not too far-fetched that he used the back cover. The entrance wall to his first exhibition is white on blue like this.
Yeah.
Right. And Olivia Harrison had posted a picture of the book, right?
Right. And she posted it in a window. And at first I
Yes.
thought, wow, this is cool. And then I looked at the bricks on the outside of the window and I realized it's in Friar Park.
Exactly.
Like, that's
Which
cool.
is really cool. And I'm so happy to see that people are acknowledging this book and recognizing it. I think it's even in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yes. It's
So
there.
kudos, and
I've been
congratulations to
appearing
you.
at the Beatle Fests.
A lot has happened since I first met you at the Beatle Fest in 2022 and bought this book.
Mm-hmm.
And you were kind enough
I've been pretty successful there. The Beatle fans are very respectful. If they're not, they just walk by silently. I'm tomatoes thrown. Good.
You were kind enough to autograph it to me.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Hmm.
And I should
I
mention
took a picture with
I
you.
have a book talk coming up. Today is the anniversary of when John got his green card. And his attorney, Leon Wiles, thank God for him. He fought the case and he won the case for John to stay here. And his son, Michael Wiles, is also an attorney. He bought the book. Unfortunately, he received it 2 days before his dad passed away. So Leon Wiles didn't get to read it. Mm-hmm. But Michael Wiles is the mayor of Englewood, New Jersey. And he suggested that I do a book talk there. So that's scheduled for October 7th at 7 p.m. If anybody can make it to Englewood, New Jersey Public Library.
Has the book done well? You've sold a lot because I think that Yoko is still quite a niche topic. For a lot. She's a very famous person, but I think it's still maybe a niche. But I'm glad to hear it's done well.
It's doing well. It would do better if I would pay for advertising, but I can't do that, so I'm just doing it on my own. And I'm just reaching the people that really appreciate it.
Yeah. Did you self-published? Yeah.
Yeah. They wanted me to cut it in half, 250 pages max. I'm like, it's impossible.
Oh yeah, but she's 89 years old.
91 years old.
She was 89 when you wrote it, right?
Yeah. What?
89 when you wrote it.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah, and not only that, I didn't write it for the sake of including every little thing, every detail, and I didn't include a lot because you just can't. Mm. But every detail in the book is fascinating and important, and it all needed to be in there.
Yes, and I think honestly, learning about her childhood and her experiences helps you understand who Yoko is, why Yoko is Yoko.
Right. Child of war, from a prestigious family, one of the richest in Japan. Right. Incredible stories about them. The love story of John and Yoko woven throughout. It's an amazing story.
Well, thank you very much, Madeline and Robert and Tony. And like I said, I hope people check out this book and all of the links for Madeline below, and also Tony and Robert's YouTube channel. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madeline.
So long.
Bye.
Bye.
That's it.